Welcome to the Sustainable Aviation Futures content piece, where we interview leading representatives from the finance industry to showcase opportunities in securing finance and investment for SAF projects. Very pleased today to be joined by Ulrike Ziegler, President of the Board of Directors at Impact and Sustainable Aviation. Welcome, Ulrike.
Hi, Harry. Lovely to meet you.
So first of all, what innovative financial instruments exist to move new projects from conception to execution?
That's a very interesting question. I guess you get that answer a lot of time because honestly, I don't think they exist yet. We need to put a lot of more work into it. I mean, I've talked to a company who's literally bringing a SAF facility online on stream in the next couple of months. And the feedback I had from these guys was putting the financing together and getting all the sources of funding that they needed to tap was adventurous. So I don't see that anything super innovative for the time being, but I think we have to work on that. We need to work on blueprints, and design replicable blueprints that can be put into place. Technologies are not fully matured. Obviously, HEFA is at the very forefront, but talking Fischer-Tropsch, alcohol-to-jet, even PTL, the TRLs are lower. So for us as financiers, we're stepping back saying this is not for us. And so a cooperation with other sources of finance to achieve a blended capital, I think that would be super important. So philanthropic capital, multilateral development banks, and regular finance. And I think it's also important that if we're talking multilateral banks, yes, it's important to support projects also in developing regions, but I think we can also do with some support in the developed regions already. So that would be my give. And I think what's very important to really mobilize funding is to make sure that we have supply and demand supported, right? It can't be just the one side, and we need to think about the risk profile and the risk mitigants associated to that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and interesting to hear the importance of already sort of developed regions and the financing behind that as well, and the importance of multilateral banks. In terms of financing SAF projects, what is the importance of financial institutions in scaling this SAF production facilities?
It's huge. According to a study done by McKinsey, we would need roughly 180 billion of financing needed each and every year through to 2050. That's a lot of money. What we see to date, the money that's being mobilized, in particular from the finance side or bank side, that's a drop of water in a super big ocean. And we're talking to our impact members, currently 41, and most of them saying, listen, we're not really actively involved in any SAF project. I think there's 2 or 3 saying we're looking at a project at the moment, but we don't think we can actually finance that one. And so we still, as banks, I think, are still familiarizing ourselves with SAF, with the technologies and the various, pathways, feedstock constrictions that we see, or restraints that we see, and understand the complex risk profiles. And in light of the amounts that I just mentioned, I don't think philanthropic capital or some other sources of finance can stomach all that. So finance, the typical project finance, will be very important going forward. But again, this is about getting the risk profile right. And I think also we could look at your question a bit the other way around, right? It's not so much how important is our financial institution for SAF, but how important is SAF for us as financial institutions? I mean, the impact members are actively involved in financing aviation and financing aircraft. So obviously we need to build a story for our internal, external stakeholders under EU taxonomy that we're channeling our funds into the right direction and helping to decarbonize. So for us, it's equally important. But I think in terms of the risk profiles that we see, we're not yet there to be, kind of all in and can be massively supportive at this point in time.
Absolutely, and I look forward to the developments of risk mitigation moving forward as well. You spoke about financing SAF projects there, but in a general sense, how can financial institutions assist the transition to renewable fuels as a whole?
I think, honestly, we need to take a step back and go to square one. This is really about building the know-how and sharing best practice, because unless we have done that, we're not going to be able to funnel money into these projects. We don't have the time also for each and every financial institutions to go through the learning process. I mean, ultimately, I think it would be very important that we unite under one umbrella to really share these best practices, to develop risk profiles, to look at risk mitigants that are feasible. And as an example, there's the Global Carbon Capture Institute, And there are numerous participants from the financing side, technology producers, but also governmental agencies who are working globally together to do just that, develop blueprints and share best practices. And I guess a lot of interaction is also required between finance and the various stakeholders, the policymakers, it's the technology infrastructure providers, electricity, if we're in particular talking about PTL. So, I think that's the first step for us to be able to assist, to build that know-how and have that exchange. And I think potentially also, the banks that do support the oil majors who do put SAF plants online, I think we can also learn from them, right? That would help us give some comfort to give them money, but also to support smaller, projects or new startups.
Absolutely. And I think you spoke about being under one umbrella there, and you mentioned policymakers. And how can a program supported by the government enhance the flow of capital into these new technologies?
I think above all, it needs to be able to de-risk us, at least, for the first couple of years until we're reaching commercialization where we see acceptability in the overall market. And, government programs, I think the most known are the IRA in the US and obviously, whatever the EU has put together on the mandate system. There is no kind of black and white. There is no perfect solution. I think both could do with a bit of an enhancement. Right, in the IRA, well, if Trump's coming into place, and I don't want to make this, kind of very political, but we know how erratic his decision making has been, under his rule. So I think that needs to be taken into account. Although I understand that both sides of the aisle will be supportive of SAF, but still it needs to be taken into account. Also, how long will all the support under the IRA be available? I mean, project financing is 10 years plus. I mean, will the support be there, or can we live off if it's tapering off throughout the term? On the mandate side for the EU, well, I think it's great to stimulate demand. Having said that, I think the demand would have been there anyways, because aviation needs to build a story, because aviation needs to decarbonize. And so on that note, it's good to have it, but I think it can also do with a bit of updating. And there was a very interesting talk I had with a senator from Massachusetts at the recent conference I attended, and he also said, we need to unite, right? We need to work together across regions, across countries to get this right. And I think that's the spirit that overall we need to have. And also policymakers, I think they must be open to look at, left, right, and center. What can we learn from each other? Obviously, the underlying policy frameworks are different, and our politics or politicians are different. But still, this is about looking for the greater good and for the common denominator. I think that's very important.
Absolutely. And yeah, echo the importance of uniting as a whole. Finally, how can the finance community help to drive projects to financial investment decisions and to reach that number of sort of 175 billion, as you mentioned earlier?
I guess it's about getting involved early. We don't have the luxury of time of sitting on the side and waiting for someone else to solve the problem, right? That we can just piggyback on. I think everyone needs to take that time to learn, to interact with the various stakeholders and share our concerns and also develop risk mitigants. And I think it's very important, again, that we're looking at a multi-stakeholder network, to really talk about our concerns and define the risk mitigants. We need to understand the role and the risk appetite of the various sources of finance and probably have more interaction between these two. In particular, I've talked to a smaller company here in Germany, that's stuck at TRL 6 to 9 in the valley of death, saying, listen, it was easy to get the seed capital to really kind of, do the R&D, what have you. But now that we need the money to move towards commercialization, it's just not there, because, I mean, the tenors are too long. Even a bank said that volume is too small, which I find interesting. But I think that's what we need to do. And I personally think uniting under that one umbrella and trying to define or design blueprints, that can be used subject to pathways, subject to region, but so that banks can literally, take it out of their jaws, say, okay, I get it, that's a risk involved, that's how you can tackle it. I think that would be extremely important for us as the finance industry to really step up the pace.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes today's discussion, and I'd like to thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your very much insightful answers.
No, thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.